Hi, and welcome to That's What She Said, where women's wisdom takes the mic. We've always been the wisdom keepers, the storytellers, the connectors, passing down truth, strength, and survival from one woman to the next. This podcast is that tradition turned all the way up. No status, no filters, no pretending to have it all figured out. Just voices that matter most, the women you know, the women you are, and the women you want to hear from. Because wisdom hits different when it comes from women who've lived it, survived it, and choose to share it. So let's dive in. When women stop hiding, stop shrinking, and stop waiting for permission, their story becomes their strategy and their voice becomes power. So, what if the reason you're stuck isn't lack of talent? It's that you're still hiding your value. You have the resume, the work ethic, the talent, the results, but somehow you're still overlooked or undercredited or waiting for permission to own how good you really are. My guest today, Shantel Love, knows that gap. She went from poverty in Detroit to becoming a global vice president of Pearson, one of the largest learning companies in the world. Chantel built influence in corporate spaces, launched her own companies, became an international speaker, a best-selling author, and built a movement called, what I love, Promote Your Damn Self. Not because she loved attention, but because Chantel learned talent without visibility gets overlooked. But what makes Chantel compelling isn't just her success. It's how she redefined leadership. Chantel believes empathy is strategy, trust is currency, and collaboration beats ego. Novel ideas. But maybe even more importantly, Chantel believes that the part of you that once felt like a disadvantage may actually be your greatest edge. She is proof that success does not require shrinking. It doesn't require code switching or becoming someone easier to digest. Sometimes the real breakthrough happens when you stop asking to be chosen and start choosing yourself. So if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or tired of playing small just to get accepted, this episode's for you. Hey, Chantel.
Hey, hey, Robin. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. I thought before we really get going, we'd go back before the titles, before the keynote stages, and before your executive role to find out, how did growing up in poverty for your childhood shape the way you saw money, success, and what was possible for you?
Mm. I, I love this, but I actually want to start with a conversation I had with my mom a few
I
weeks
love that.
ago, actually.
Mhm.
And I've been doing some reflection, and I asked my mom. I said, "Hey, mom, what did I want to be when I grow up? Like, did I want to be like a doctor or a firefighter or a nurse?" And she said, "No, you didn't want to be a doctor. You didn't want to be a firefighter. You didn't want to be a nurse. You wanted to be successful." And,
Mm,
when she said that, it made me pause because when I think about growing up in poverty, when I think about growing up in Detroit, I had no idea that I was in poverty because everyone around me was okay with the circumstances. They were
mm,
okay with where they were. And something inside of me honored the fact, okay, I have a mom. My mom had me at 15 years old, and she did the best what she could with everything that she had. And she was a single mom, but I knew that I was meant for so much more. So
mm,
my vision and my value and my opinion of money and success and more was shaped from being in a place where I was at the complete and utter bottom, the bottom of the totem pole, the bottom of the social economic status. And just having had that experience, I knew that there was only one way out, and that way out was up. And when I think about some of the things that I have done to get to my up, it was being extremely radical. Like, what I mean by being radical, like bucking the system against this is what it's going to be. No, it's not what it is going to be for me. After seeing generations of poverty, I was
yeah.
not going to be the victim of generational poverty. So I found myself doing all the things that they said to do right. Go to school, get good grades, work hard. And that was my life. I wanted to be better. So I worked harder. I was the first in the office and the last to leave when I finally got my first corporate job. And I knew that I wasn't going backwards. So when you ask the question like what was my view of money and poverty,
Mhm.
I knew what it felt like not to have money. I knew what it felt like to get a speech before you walked into the store. And that speech was, when we go in this store, you don't ask for anything, you don't touch anything, you don't get anything. And it wasn't because it wasn't that my mom or my family wanted to give me, they just could not.
Right.
So they didn't want to put that pressure on themselves. And knowing that, I wanted to walk into the store so I can touch something and get anything that I wanted. And I understood that the way to get that was upward mobility. So going to school, understanding that I had to be the first, the last, the hardest working. And that was my contribution to my success. And I'm not surprised that by the age of 29, I bought and paid off my first home in full. I'm not surprised that within 4 years, I went from an entry level position making $19 an hour to an executive level position making multi six figures. I'm not
Mm.
surprised that I have a amazing family, a husband with a PhD who supports me selflessly, and we don't compete, and a beautiful son who looks up to his parents and understands that the sky is not the limit. So everything about money, mindset, what is possible started from the bottom, started from that place of poverty.
How did you frame what success was when it sounds like you didn't have a lot of clear models around that?
Mhm.
Because I think a lot of women might
Yeah,
be listening to your story and saying, "I don't even know what success looks like for me. I can't even
yeah.
imagine getting to that level." How did you create that image or that vision for yourself?
Yeah, I honestly think the biggest lie that we've been told is that in order to be successful, you have to see someone doing it. And I think that
Mm,
that's just a lie. I think the reality is if you feel in your bones and you feel in your heart that something's not right, you don't need to see what's right in order to move toward that right.
mm,
So, of course, I would say I did not have the best models. My models were good government jobs. Being a postal service worker or working in a factory or being a teacher, right? But I think even with not having the models, the thing that I don't want anyone to take away with, I had people who poured into me. Like I am definitely living in answered prayers. There may not be prayers that I had, but my
mm,
grandmother who moved from Alabama to Detroit knowing that this was the best option for the family and worked her whole career in a deli making sandwiches for people. She always said, "You're going to be successful. You're going to be a professor. You're going to be the one who changes our family's trajectory." So I did not have to see it. It was poured into me. So much so I started to believe it. And when I say I started to believe it, it was situating myself into spaces where I can visualize success. I can shape my view of success. And I remember even as young as high school, I was the class president of my senior class, and I was in these business programs. And when you're in these business programs, you go to these national competitions. So I got on my first plane ride at 14 years old, and I went to Utah. I didn't even know where Utah was on the map. But I went to this beautiful hotel with all of these people who were pitching ideas about businesses and about business strategy. So that was exposure, right? So while you may not see what it is, if you put yourself in those situations, if people are pouring into you and you believe it, you'll get the exposure and you can shape what that ideology of success looks like if you allow yourself the opportunity to be exposed and to be
mhm,
vulnerable and to put yourself in spaces where individuals are doing the things that you can only imagine doing. And then I think the other thing that I would say is I learned very early on that I'm only as good as what I ask for. So when I started getting in these spaces, instead of just sitting there and absorbing, I started asking questions. How did you get here? What was the hardest
mm,
thing? What organizations are you a part of? And then I got nosy. How much are you making? And some people answered and some people didn't, but I was only as good as the questions that I asked. So it started with beliefs followed by access and proximity, and then asking. Be okay with asking those questions that feel odd or weird. The only thing that they can do is say, answer the question or say no. And we've heard no our whole life.
Mm. You talk about your belief system, and one of the beliefs that you talk about regularly is the idea that your superpower can often be the thing that you're used to being ashamed of. Can you
Hmm.
explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I sure can. I think the reality of that, you see someone who's successful and you think to them, oh, they had it easy or they didn't have to go through anything. And I know for me, as a woman who was born to a 15-year-old mom who worked 25 years in this company, making $20 an hour, never received a pay raise her entire time that she was working there. She gave me so much motivation. And I think when people hear the word motivation, it's only from that positive perspective. I'm motivated or I'm
Right.
inspired to, be at their level. But my mom motivated me and inspired me because she tried her best and it wasn't good enough. How can your best not be good enough when that's all you
Right.
have? So, when I say, like, my superpower was, society taught me that I should be ashamed of the fact that my mom had me at 15 years old. Society taught me that I should be ashamed of the fact that my father left me and my family, and he's a drug dealer. Society taught me that I should be ashamed of the fact that I came from humble beginnings. But what if that's what I needed to appreciate this space right now? When I think about being a global vice president at the world's largest learning company and making history, I became the first Black woman vice president in the history of my division. That is just mind blowing to hear, like, from where I came from. But that aside, when I'm given a budget, right? And they're like, we have this big old challenge. We have to cut $1 million. I'm used to making two pieces of bread last for a week. Give me some spaghetti noodles. They'll last for 2 weeks, right? So, when I think of it from that perspective, you can look at it like, oh, woe is me. I should be ashamed.
Mm.
But
Right.
that was my corporate training tank before I had a corporate training tank. You give me a budget, you ask me to create a cost reduction strategy. Cost reduction strategies was my life. I can manage a budget, right? I had a shoestring budget. Now I have 8 and 9 figure budgets, and I'm taking everything that I learned from my humble beginning. So, yes, that quote unquote shame that society taught me that I wasn't supposed to really lean into actually became my superpower. And those are
Mm.
the things that elevated me in corporate America. And those are the things that get me hired on stages because of my story that I thought at one point in life wasn't good enough.
Mm. So you're talking about the things that we think as women that we need to erase, that they actually can become our edge.
Yeah.
That's
If you allow
that
it, if
yeah,
we
if you
allow
allow
it,
it.
that's a choice.
And I love how you took that example of that you had that you developed the skill set of working with a budget in your personal life, and now you're just generalizing it on a much grander scale.
Yes.
And that is important for women to hear because when I've come in contact with some of my clients and they, maybe they were originally stay-at-home moms, now the kids are, off on their own and they're like, "I have nothing to offer." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? You've done project management, you've organized a team, you've done negotiation, you've worked with budgets, you have done things." And they're like, "Oh, but that's different." It's not, because those are the foundational skills that now you can grow, and I think that's what I'm hearing you talk about.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing that I want to hear for the person who's listening. You may be listening right now to this podcast and thinking to yourself, wow, Chantel has it going on. She's so secure in herself and she knows where she's going. But I want to let you in on something. I used to be the most insecure person. And when I mean insecure, my inner saboteur used to do work on me. Her name is Big Bertha, and I'm sorry for any of the Berthas out there if I offended you. But what I realize is that that voice inside of my head, Big Bertha, she would tell me what I couldn't do, where
Mhm.
I didn't belong, how I wasn't going to accomplish something. And there were moments in my life, honestly, where I listened to that voice so long and I was just stuck and slumped and making all of these excuses. And then I decided one day, Bertha, you don't own this space. I'm not allowing you to take over my life. And I decided to really take the step forward and challenge my belief system and see what was possible, right? And see what was possible. And what I know, and part of the reason why I wrote the book, Promote Your Damn Self, and part of the reason why I speak on stages is because what I know to be true about women is that we don't necessarily know how to get paid. And paid is
Mm.
a framework that I lead with. Just like the example that you mentioned, the P is for positioning. If you don't have an understanding of how to position the things that you do on a daily basis for the value of someone else, be it a job, be it a client, be it an organization, you're doing a disservice to yourself. So just as I took the two pieces of bread that I can make stretch for a week and a half, that applied to the corporate space. I know resiliency. I know how to use limited resources. I know how to maximize our output. I know how to do more with less. And I think that that's really important. And then if we don't know how to position, how can we amplify it? That's the A,
Mhm.
amplify what you've done. How do you get in proximity of those individuals who are doing the things that you want to do? How can you leverage your internal organization to create influence and champions who vocalize your value? How do you use social media to lean into spaces like LinkedIn to find
Mhm.
opportunities for your message to be heard? And then the I of the package is invite. So as you're doing all of this reflection and you're learning how to position yourself and amplify it, how do you invite people to an opportunity to partner with you, to work with you, to advance you, right? And we don't necessarily learn the words of how do I invite a leader who's two levels above me to a conversation where I can plant the seed for future opportunities. And then when those opportunities come, the D, how do I deliver on these expectations if I've never done it before? And that was my life. So I packaged it up into the paid framework, and it took me from poverty to prosperity. And I'm in a space now where I know that this isn't just a message for me. If I was able to do it, I know that I can support and empower so many people across the globe to do it. And that's what I've been doing. So
Mm.
again, going back to your point, Robin, I think the reality of where we aren't taught as women. We aren't taught to look at what we do on a daily basis and position it. We know how to write a resume for a job, but we don't necessarily know how to just take a pause. I did this project on this day, or I did this with my family, or I did this at my church, or people naturally come to me for my advice on this. That's all currency. All of it
Mhm.
is.
Why do you think, and when we have so many talented women out there at all different types of levels and experience, but essentially a good majority of us are uncomfortable talking about our own value? Maybe not even just talking about it, but demanding compensation for our value. Why do you think that
Mhm.
is?
I think two things that comes to mind. One, of course, we haven't been taught, and two, we haven't practiced enough. Right. So
Mm.
I think, of course, the teaching is only a part of it. I've learned so much in my life, and I'm sure you have, Dr. Buckley. Right. But if you don't apply it, and if you don't get the practice, it's just knowledge that's going to stay right here in the back of your mind until you pull it to the front, right? So I know that for a fact. The second part is practice. The reason why I love women's organizations and women's conferences is that they create these environments that are safe places. And they aren't just safe places where we can kumbaya or just safe spaces where people can relate. These are the incubators for where we want to go. So when I was coming up through the ranks and I was trying to find these safe places, I would use those places to practice. I would use those places to ask. I would use those places and networks to do mock interviews with so that when I got into the real environment, I knew the words to say. I knew how to pivot. I knew how to create that awkward silence that makes people feel uncomfortable, right? And I think the reason why most don't ask their worth is because they don't know how. They haven't been taught. They don't know how to research and haven't had the practice. And I think the opportunities are right there. And oftentimes, when you don't have a space to go, sometimes you just got to create that space. No one's stopping you from creating a space of being honest and saying, hey, I've left a whole bunch of money on the table and
Huh.
I don't want that to be the next season of my life. Are there any women out there that would be open to meeting once a month where we just talk about pay equity? We talk about strategies. We talk about
Mhm.
how to find out what a comp ratio is so that I can understand if I'm being paid fairly or being underpaid, and just starting those conversations. A movement only moves if you take a step forward. So I genuinely believe that's why so many women are in a space where they're underpaid, underpositioned, and underappreciated. Now, don't get me wrong, there are so many systemic issues that do stand in our way, but there are
Mhm.
also so many women and even men, allies that are willing to advance and to support if you ask, if you build that network, and if you build that rapport.
I call it passive promotion, where the
Mm,
belief is we'll just work hard and our hard work should speak for itself. And that cost of staying quiet, hoping someone notices, to me is one of the most passive thing. Even though with people I'll talk to them, they're like, "No, but I'm working hard. I'm doing all the things. I'm like, "But that's still passive because you are not actively
yeah.
taking control. You're still relying on someone else to see you." And
Yes.
there's a difference. So many people will say, "Well, I don't wanna come across as braggy. I don't wanna come across as arrogant." But there's a difference between self-promotion that's rooted in ego and self-promotion that's rooted in self-respect.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So I actually want to give an example that's not even related to corporate America. And I had to learn this the hard way when I was rejected from every single graduate school that I applied to.
Oh, me
And
too.
you are, see, look at that. And you're still a doctor, right? So
I pushed
I
through.
love that. I love that. And when I was rejected from every single graduate school, um, I cried, and I'm not gonna pull the wool over your eyes. I cried because not because I was rejected, I was crying because of the promises that I knew that were attached to upward mobility. And it
Mhm,
started resurfacing all of that shame, all of the rejections from, my dad, all of the fact that, hey, you're just the girl who is from the east side of Detroit, born to a 15-year-old girl. All of that kept resurfacing. So after I dried my tears, I was talking to my husband at the time who was working on his PhD, and he said, all right, you got rejected from all these schools. What are we going to do? What are you going to do? And I said, we're not going to do anything, but I'm going to go down to that school and I'm going to plead my case. And when I went down to the school, as I was driving, Bertha was working on me. She said, girl, when you go down
mhm.
here, you're going to get arrested. It's a police officer that's there waiting for you. The doors are going to be closed. They're going to embarrass you so bad. And when I got there, I said, keep going, keep going, keep going. I got there. The doors were open. There wasn't a police officer there waiting for me. But there was a lady at the front desk. And she said, how may I help you? I said, I'm here to contest a admissions rejection letter. She says, do you have an appointment? I said, I don't, but I would like to talk to the dean of the College of Business and the dean of admissions. And she said, I'll see what we can do. I sat in that lobby for 2 hours until somebody came to see me. And when I went into that office, I had my facts ready. My facts were, the fact that I didn't get into school was because my GMAT scores were under their recommended level.
Mhm.
And GMAT scores only predict the first year of performance in a university. And by that time, I had many years of corporate experience where I've exceeded expectations. I had letters of recommendations. I had performance reviews ready. I had went from undergrad with my first year in undergrad, I was in remedial reading And I went from remedial reading to the honors dorm and received straight A's. So I used that as proof and facts. And I let them know that, the emotional part of it, what this meant for me, what this was attached to. This wasn't just a girl who was showing up to go to school just to check a box.
Right.
This was my future.
Mhm.
And after I made that pitch, they said I was the first person in the history of their institution to come in to contest a rejection. I left with a scholarship, and I also left with a mentor and a conditional acceptance letter. And I bring this up because it applies to the corporate space. When you're going in to ask for something, you have to do your research and understand what you're asking for. You can't go
Mhm.
in with all of your emotions. Get the emotions
Yep.
out. We have to go from feelings to facts. And oftentimes people are worried about looking or feeling a certain way. There are certain employment laws. They cannot retaliate against you for asking for a
Mhm.
compensation. That's an employment law. If you were to go in and ask for a certain rate, have your facts. It is 2026. There is so much data available out there on the websites and AI tools and just equity sites. Um, there's so much to arm you with going into those conversations where you should now be going in, if you've done your research and use your network and use your resources, where you're going in not in your feelings, but positioning the facts. And that's
Mhm.
the key differentiator.
I think that's the difference. What you said right there is that when we go in with self-promotion based on ego, it's based on feelings and our beliefs, which aren't necessarily real. But when we go in with self-promotion based in self-respect, that is about facts, data, evidence, all of the concrete, tangible proof of why we are asking for a promotion or for compensation or whatever it might be. And on a
Mhm.
side note, Chantel, I knew I loved you when we first met because the way I got into graduate school was because I marched myself down, or my dad drove me to the graduate school, and I met with the chair of the department and said, "Here's why you made a mistake. Here's why you should bring me in." And same thing, they always had 25 people in the cohort, and that year was 26 because they let me in because I did that, and I never thought that that would have worked, but my dad was like, "Choose the one program that you think you really wanna go to. Ask to see the chair. What's the worst that can happen? They could say no." And he said yes, and it was the worst interview of my life because he, was definitely a misogynist. One of my first experiences with that, ignored me basically the whole interview, so I stormed out of there so angry, and then by the time I got home, there was a voice message saying, "We'd like to welcome you in." I'm like, how did that happen?" But it's what you're talking about. It's that level of self-respect that, no, I know that I belong here, and it's not
Mhm.
because I don't have proof. I worked my ass off. I did the things.
Yes.
So I hear that's what you're talking about, and I love that we share that approach.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes, you gotta choose yourself sometime. It's okay
Yes.
with that. And, again, like we've heard no, like the worst thing that could have happened, seriously, and this is how I want to make sure I get this for the audience. The worst thing that could have happened in that situation is that that one institution said no again.
Right.
There are
Mhm.
thousands
Yep.
of other institutions out there, and we don't allow ourselves to understand that it is limitless. We limit ourselves. And I'm so glad that you
Exactly.
didn't limit yourself, my friend. Oh, that's so
Me too
good.
for you. Part of all of this, what we keep seeing we're seeming to circle around is this idea of personal branding, how we see ourselves, how we put ourselves out to the world. What do you think people get wrong about personal branding?
Mhm, that they have to be somebody else? I think the
Um,
thing that they get wrong is that they have to be someone else, and I've been guilty of it too. I remember when I was building my personal brand out, I wanted to fit into this box of just being this successful executive. I didn't wanna show anyone the human sides of me, and that worked until it didn't because I was like, "Why am I not sharing and showing who I am?" I was just so worried about being judged. And, I think the reality of that, most people are worried about being judged. I've coached so many people up until this point. I have mentees and clients around the world. I was talking to one of my clients in Australia recently, and she said, Chantel, I know personal branding is really, really important, but what do I say? And I'm like,
Mhm.
you have a lot to say. We've been meeting for a whole month now, and you've told me that you've been the first in your family to go to university. You said that you're a pianist and you've been playing since you were 3 years old. So you've consistent, you're loyal. You mentioned that you are the first in this department to ever become a principal researcher. What do you mean you don't have things to talk about? And I think we just forget how good we are because we are taught to be humble and put your head down. I
Yeah.
don't think chronicling your success is not being humble. I mean, it's the truth. I'm humbly accepting the fact that I am amazing. I am humbly
Mhm.
accepting the fact that God has blessed me with these gifts to share with other people, and I give him the glory. But I think the thing is, we forget to take the opportunity to realize what we've done. And then I think even on the other side of that, the lessons that we've learned. Like we avoid talking about our failures and what we've learned. I mean, God knows that I've learned so much more from my failures than my
Absolutely.
successes. And I think that, we miss out on the opportunity to understand that it's called personal branding for a reason. The person is the brand, the good, the bad, the ugly, the learning, the developing, the evolving. That is your personal brand. And,
Mm.
you choose how that brand shows up. It does look different in corporate versus what it looks like on social. Your personal brand looks different with your family. Your personal brand looks different with your colleagues or your girlfriends or whoever. But people get the fact that personal branding is about the person, and you choose how you want to curate your personal brand. Do you want to use it to get you elevated in your career? Do you want to use it as your safety net? Do you want to use it to get speaking opportunities, to create a side hustle? Do you want to use it for a movement, to make impact, to advocate for under marginalized people? That's your choice. And I think people get it wrong because they're trying to fit in a box that was never even meant for them.
You were differentiating that there's a personal brand and then maybe a professional or corporate brand. Can those 2 ever dovetail?
I think so. And I think it just depends on the person, right? There is, and I'll use me for an example because I don't mind
Okay.
telling my business. But what I will say is that, in working for the world's largest learning company, I have a unique position because there is a lot of people within my company that also have brands or also have a company on the outside. There are a lot of consultants who work for the
Mhm.
company and they have a consultant practice outside, or clinicians, or they're practitioners, right, in the field, or they're authors, or they've contributed to some body of work, right? So I am uniquely positioned in that regard because that more or less is more normal in the
Mhm.
space that I work in. Even my CEO has written a book, right? So I think that there is a brand that aligns with the person who's in corporate America, right? I wouldn't come in and represent my brand as someone who chugs kegs on the weekend and hangs off chandeliers, and I won't talk about that in the meeting because that's my personal business if I chose to do it. Mind you, I do not hang off chandeliers or drink from a keg. But if you do, that's your business. But I do think that it is important to curate that brand for corporate America, depending on what you want to do. There are certain people who have a brand in corporate America and they want to be the reliable person and don't want to move up. That's good because that's their choice. They want that security where they are. That may help with work life balance. There may be someone who wants to curate a corporate personal brand that gets them visibility from the people who have the power, the authority, and the influence to advance and to promote them. That's great. But my brand within corporate America looks quite similar to my brand outside of it because I'm at a
Mhm.
point where I'm just who I am. I wouldn't do anything to jeopardize the integrity of my family. I wouldn't do anything to jeopardize the integrity of how I'm viewed and corporate. So the same way that I'm
Mhm.
talking to you, I would talk to my manager. I would talk to my CEO. I am who I am. So I think for some people, they'll have to get to that point of what does authenticity look like for me in this space versus what does authenticity look like for me in this space. And I was just tired of trying to be something different everywhere. Code switching is exhausting, and I'm just
Right.
done with it.
Well, and I think that also really blends nicely with what you talk about in terms of leadership, that, you talk about leadership in a very different way than how
Yeah.
most people, certainly, generationally up until maybe the younger millennials, we have
Yes.
had leadership from a much more masculine
Mhm.
dominated perspective. And now all of a sudden you're crazy, Chantel. You're talking about empathy and
Yes.
trust and
Yes.
connection. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about how you have seen that approach to leadership impact performance in the corporate
Oh.
world.
Yes. Oh, yes. So, just for the record, I have a global team that's located, a global team of 300 employees that are located across every continent with the exception of Antarctica. So,
Mm,
even today, I started my day speaking with my colleagues in the UK, and I end my day speaking with colleagues in Australia, right? So, I've had leadership across the board. And every year, my leadership team does a leadership summit. We'll pick a location and we'll go there and we'll do the leadership summit. This year, it happened to be in Madrid, Spain. And in that leadership summit, we talk about the things that they say you're not supposed to talk about at work. And the reason why I do that is because when you show up to work, you don't leave your human at the door. You don't leave your human at the door. You don't leave anything. It's here with you. So let's create the space where you can be human and we can get work done. And what I've discovered and found is that humans enjoy being seen. Humans enjoy being heard. Humans enjoy being validated. And, for me, I run peak performance organizations because that's just what is the standard. Peak performance is the standard. Excellence is the standard. I do not promote or support mediocrity.
mhm,
And from that perspective, it's gotten us some really great recognition. My team is ranked in the top 5% of Gallup's most engaged teams because we show our human. We laugh, we talk, we share cultural norms, we learn from each other, we respect each other, we debate, we disagree respectfully. And I think that's the reality of the world that we live in. And when we are able to perform that way, we can get much more done quicker. We can innovate. Ideas come from all over.
mhm,
And what I mean by that, someone who's in an individual contributor role can come directly to me knowing that there is no door. This title that I have, they could take it away from me tomorrow. I can't care too much about a title. I'm not the title. I am here to do a job. And in order for me to do my job at this level, I need others to understand that they're a part of this journey. And to
mhm.
be a part of this journey, yes, when I talk to you, I'm going to remember your dog's name. Yes, when I talk to you, I'm going to celebrate your anniversary. Yes, you got a new car. I'm happy that you got a new car because I know you've been saving for months. And when you meet people, humans, and I think this is the thing, when you think about where we are today in this AI era, the only position anywhere, the only title I should say that has human in it is human resources. And that's foolish. I support humans in a technology organization, and the way that I do it successfully is understand that human intelligence is still very important. Human emotion and emotional intelligence is a skill that is needed to navigate a global organization to get to the point of peak performance. Yes, the stats, yes, the data, yes, the strategy is important, but I can't execute on the strategy if I don't have people to do it.
Right. So, is it fair for me to say that everything you're talking about sounds like you focus on managing humans versus managing output or products? Because my
Right.
assumption is that you see that just a direct connection. When you're
Yes.
connected and managing the humans, the rest is going to happen.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Got
And
that.
and it's worked for me, and I mean, I've worked for only big companies. I've worked for Oracle, I worked for Walt Disney World, I worked for NBC, Universal, Comcast. Now I work for Pearson, and I've adopted that practice in every organization, and that's what works for me. And like my grandfather said colloquially, "If it's not broke, don't fix it." And I'm not trying to fix something or be something else because when I focus on the humans, and that looks
Mm,
like development. And sometimes I'll see a human and I'm like, okay, they want to be better, but I don't think they know how to articulate what they need. Let me hire them an executive coach. Not because I'm worried that they're going to leave. If they choose to leave, that's their
mhm.
prerogative. But they know they have a leader that's going to pour into them. So when they know they have someone that's going to pour into them, that's going to support them, that's not going to judge them, that's going to give them the space, they'll stick around. I don't have turnover issues.
So if you were gonna articulate what you'd like to see happen in leadership in terms of characteristics or approaches, what would you add to create an effective leadership model in your opinion?
Mm. What I've noticed in leadership is that once you get to leadership in most companies, you get the role, they celebrate you like, yay, you got it. But you don't necessarily have a blueprint in order to get to that point of success.
Mhm,
You do have experiences though. And what I mean by those experiences is that you know what a really good manager feels like, right? Versus a manager or a quote unquote leader that does not feel too good. So you have those experiences that you come in with. And most people won't admit it, but when they get into leadership roles, they're either one of two things. They're either the furthest thing from the worst manager that they've had, or they're mirroring the best manager that they had, or it may be a
mhm,
combination of something in between. And I would say the one thing that I would say that I would highly encourage or recommend in a leadership model, aside from, just understanding intelligence and strategy and all of that good stuff, is to remove the ego, right? Remove the ego and be a student. And what I mean by
mhm,
be a student of your industry, be a student of your products, be a student of your teams, be a student of your culture, and remove that ego. Don't I see too many leaders who believe, hey, I have to know every single thing. I work in a division that has 900 products and I've been here for 12 years. Please don't ask me about 900. But know, what I do know is that I've removed my ego enough where I can support and understand who the experts are.
yes.
I remove my ego enough to understand, where the friction and the fragmentation is. I remove my ego enough to listen to our customers where they'll tell me exactly what the problem is, and I don't have to figure it out if I remove my ego and allow myself to listen. So I would encourage, it may not be a leadership methodology or a framework, but it starts with the person who's in the seat of the leadership role. And if their ego is pointed one direction, now ego is positive and it's also negative. But if their ego is swayed one direction more than the other, and they see themselves as the reason for success, the reason for the outcome, I think that's where the challenge and the problem typically starts.
Okay, so with all of this, if there's a woman sitting here listening to you and she knows she's capable, but she is still hesitating to own her value out loud, what would you tell her to stop doing or stop waiting for starting today?
I would say first and foremost, stop taking on other people's opinion of you. Come up with your
Mm,
own opinion of yourself, right? And if you're okay with that opinion of who you are, who you're becoming, you're in a much better space than many, many other people, right? And secondly, I would tell her to go grab my book, Promote Your Damn Self, on Amazon or
100%.
shantellove.com, because the book itself is not just a read, it's a, hey, let me take inventory of the person I am now, document my wins and be okay. Hey, you are the CEO of your life
Right.
and you're responsible for who you're becoming, nobody else. So don't focus on those labels. Don't focus on what someone has projected on you. Who do you want to become in this season of your life and have fun with it?
Now, I have some quick rapid fire questions for you. You ready for them?
Okay. I'm ready.
Which, what's your go to Power Woman song?
This Girl Is on Fire by Alicia Keys.
Mhm, mhm. Her live version of that is amazing.
So good.
What's one life hack or tip that you use?
Prayer,
Mhm.
meditation, therapy. I know I'm grouping that all together, just reflection.
Besides your book, what's one of your favorite books?
Oh, I'm reading this is a good one because 'cause I'm reading so many right now. The one that I will call out right now is The Four Agreements. The Four
Oh,
Agreements by Miguel Ruiz.
mm, that's a classic,
It
really. Yeah.
is.
And then what's one belief, Chantel, you had to unlearn?
The belief that you don't have to unlearn anything. I think the thing is, I believe that if you unlearn something, you're telling yourself to forget about it. So if it comes back, you don't even recognize it anymore. So I would say the belief that I had to take on is to learn a different way.
Then what's something coming up that you're excited about?
I am so excited about two things. So my husband and I are celebrating 15 years of marriage.
Me too
And
this
I
year in November.
Really?
Thank you.
Congratulations. So I'm so excited because everyone sees the brand, but the person who's been behind that brand with me has been my husband, Dr. Love, Dr. Quentin Love. And I partner with a lot of companies like Five9, AWS, Sisters in Sales. And my husband and I, instead of us doing like anniversary gifts, our gift to the world is a relationship podcast that we're going to do together on how we've achieved this successful marriage. So I'm really excited about that. And then I'm also working on launching Promote Your Damn Self Live, which is a cohort experience where I break down the exact strategies on how I went from poverty to prosperity, how to package and position yourself, how to amplify your presence and your brand, and how to invite people to give you opportunities like podcasts, job promotions, and deliver on those expectations. So I'm really excited about that. I've been bringing it to stages around the world, and now I'm going to package it as a cohort. So I can't wait for that to hit the market.
All amazing, and I guarantee that when it is out there, I'm gonna make sure people know where to find not only your podcast, but the cohort opportunity, because all that you're offering is just part of how women can build their lives and build this world. So thank you for all of that, Chantel, and like I said, all the details will be in the show notes about all your projects. But to all of you who are listening, please take what you heard today from Chantel and carry what matters. Pass the wisdom forward, because when women speak, the world changes. Thanks for listening, and see you next time on That's What She Said. Follow That's What She Said on social media on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. That's What She Said is created, hosted, and executive produced by Dr. Robin Buckley. Our Senior VP of Productions and Content Strategy Consultant is Dr. Tom Grabowski. Jordan Gilbert is our show's Marketing and Creative Content Specialist. Senior producer is Quentin Sukup. And remember to keep the conversation going. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether you're a woman who's lived it or a woman who's building it.